Hello, Melanin Monarchy citizens. This is Monique here, and I have another great, exciting treat for you guys. I have Von Harris back here, back with me, and I also have another treat. I have my bruh, even though he wouldn't want me to say that, you guys, Mr. Merrick MacArthur, and we're going to be having a little chat here. We're going to be talking all things Von Harris right now. So I know that Von, I mentioned in our previous interview with Doug how my brother was crying. He was crying because he wasn't there. So now he has a chance to be here in person to ask you all the questions that he would have asked you back then.
Sure, and I'm crying is I'm basically the entertainment correspondent for the Melanin Monarchy Network. So I'm here to have my time with Von and Monique, and also talk about how that last interview was with Von and Doug. That was fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of great insight there. Things that I always want to know.
What people didn't like?
What's that?
People didn't like, they thought that I was calling them stupid.
Really?
When I made the comment about, they said they were young and they just didn't care, and I said, oh, were you young?
No, they said they're still stupid. We're still stupid. We're just
we're the first to admit it. So,
no.
You shouldn't take heat for that. We freely admit it.
No, it's a great interview. If you haven't seen it, please check it out on melaninmonarchy.com.
Our YouTube channel, Melanin Monarchy, Instagram, Melanin Monarchy, will take you over there, and Facebook, I think I kind of closed down Facebook a little bit because it was getting a little bit much, but you can find me, yes. And even on LinkedIn too, yeah.
All right, so hear this song? Wait a second. That was the sound of the first 12 notes of Joining the Chant, which, if you're like me growing up in the late 80s, and you heard those first 12 notes come on, you lost your stuff.
Yes.
And had to jump up. So I'm glad to finally be able to sit down with you and just, express my sincere thank you for providing me and my group of friends at that time with such a wonderful sound and music and experience in your band with Doug and David. And again, great interview. I've always wanted.
Are there any friends from back in the day, back in Detroit, back in the D? Name off some of your haunts there, the clubs that were there where you were listening to Nitzer Ebb.
Sure. Absolutely.
Who was with you at that time, Mr. MacArthur?
I can't. I won't. There's a reason why.
Were you as crazy on Joining the Chant as you were? Because you're so cool. You don't even you just move with your
I was younger. No, I was younger then.
Okay.
But there are certain things that
any names?
I won't say names. There's a reason why people from the group in the 80s like the fact that there was no social media back then. There's no proof of anything.
Yeah.
So I can say stuff and it may not be true. But anyway, there was a place called Todd's in Detroit, Michigan, which was a very well-known haunt for great music and an alternative scene. Also, The Shelter, one of my favorites. In the basement of St. Andrews Hall, and there was a place called the City Club, which was also great, and in Ann Arbor, the Nectarine Ball, or the Nicotine Bathroom. That was a great. Again, the videos would come on with bands like yours, or Depeche Mode, or Sinead O'Connor. All those groups would. So those are great times. Susie and Banshees, of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Did you ever play at the Fox Theater in Detroit?
I don't believe we did.
Yeah.
Mainly it was St. Andrews.
St. Andrews Hall? Yeah, that was the place.
That was the home from home.
That was. Did you know a guy named Amir Daiza?
We sure did.
Really?
Yeah.
Fantastic. I want to hear since I will tell you this. I met Amir. I was waiting tables as a kid in Detroit.
Yeah.
Years ago, there's a place called the Rattlesnake Club, and then they opened up another place called Trevite. It was in the Fox Theater.
Yeah.
And I met Amir Daiza. He came in with some young girls. He was that guy.
Yeah.
And we hit it off, had a conversation. I think there's an after party. And then a few years later, I was bartending, and I was looking for a job as a bartender.
Yeah.
And he just opened up a club in Pontiac called Club Industry. In Pontiac.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anyone there. I'm just looking for work, and I waiting outside. There's no way for me to get in, and Amir walks up from out of nowhere, comes to the front door. He says, "Hey, so what are you doing?" "I'm looking for a job." "Oh, come on in." Comes in, takes me to the basement where his bar manager all were. He goes, "Hey, give this guy a job." And they looked at me like, "What the?" And I got a job at Industry.
Excellent.
Because of Amir Daiza. But what was your experience with Amir Daiza?
Yeah, I mean, was kind of a staple on the scene at St. Andrews, and from our earliest gigs he was around, and later on Doug lived in Detroit or just outside Detroit. So, you know, they saw each other a lot of the time and were pretty good friends. So just one of those faces, you know, as soon as you get to a certain town, there's a person that's instrumental in the music scene and you just stay friends with them.
Sure, yeah. A lot of great things in the interview, like how you a lot of your inspiration came from the old R&B music you listened to back in the UK.
And that's another thing that I wanted to say. You guys knocked me off my game because I had all these questions. I was so nervous, right? And I wanted to make sure that I got all those questions down because I only had a few minutes with you. I wanted longer, but I only had a few minutes. And so my zinger question was, hey, you know, did you guys know that you had a connection with the Black community in Detroit? And I was waiting, right? And Bon and Doug both looked at me and like, yeah. And I was like,
that surprised me also.
They're like, why are you shocked? So what was that about? Like, that wasn't like a question that, it seemed like a question that you are used to getting. Is that a question that you're used to getting, or you just felt so confident on what was going on in your lives back then that it wasn't like the zinger question that I wanted?
It's not a question that it's not a connection that a lot of interviewers make, but for us it's a perfectly natural thing because most of what was influencing us from the early days, before punk rock really happened, in England the sort of biggest form of sort of protest alternative music was reggae.
Oh, okay.
And then a little later on, you know, we were getting into James Brown and a lot of soul and funk music. My brother would go to record stores and primarily that's what he was into. So, you know, and I did a radio show interview yesterday and one of the sort of pivotal influences was Sylvester. So
Bon, go ahead and tell the audience where they can find that radio interview.
That's on my friend Atuza has a show on Amp Radio, which I believe is affiliated with Amazon, so you can just download the Amp app and you can find Atuza on there. I think on the app she goes by capital A number 2 S-A, Atuza. And so we did that interview yesterday, but sort of that was towards the mid 70s. Sylvester, Mighty Real, those sort of tracks. Yeah. So there was, maybe Mighty Real and Donna Summer, I Feel Love, were the first two songs that really made me focus on synthesizers. But because that was happening around the mid 70s, 76, 77, punk rock was also happening. So I was experiencing all these things at the same time. And sort of just by osmosis, I felt like those tracks were coming from, Donna Summer and Sylvester were coming from more of an underground club scene. And I kind of felt like a little bit of a, especially Sylvester, like, such a kind of a revolutionary and countercultural character at the time. There was a punk rockness about it to me that fit with everything. And I was saying in the interview yesterday that Mighty Real seemed to me to really be a signpost to the future. So like what was going to come. And I could kind of imagine like, if this punk rock spirit meets this more independent disco spirit and synthesizer are at the heart of it, I'm like, that's a future I can really get on board with and get excited about. But the fact of the matter is a huge amount of the influence behind Nitzer Ebb was, soul and funk music and primarily black artists, and reggae and dub and all that stuff. So even though, we adopted a little bit more, maybe took some things from like Kraftwerk and some of the European bands where perhaps it wasn't so obviously funky and the beats were a little more harder edged and straighter, I always felt that like, even though we were classified in as like an industrial band, I always felt we had a slightly looser and funkier edge to it. And certainly that was the influence behind it. So for us, it's, when you ask that question, we're like, sure, like 75% of our influence was from black musicians, funk and soul music and disco.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I want to, because I have a lot that I want to get into about that, but I want to go forward just a little bit, Merrick, if that's okay.
Sure.
If we just talk about.
I mean, you had a whole interview to do this, but go right ahead.
I'll be tracking him down for more. But we want to go ahead and just talk about like your new stuff.
Yeah.
And if you-
Well, I will. I think that's good too. But I want to kind of go back, if you don't mind, because I missed some things from your interview that I was hoping
But
to get.
I was gonna go back later. Do you want to do it like now? You want to get all that stuff in? Or
Can
do
you
it-
tell their siblings?
I know, right? Do that first. You can do what you want to do.
Well, no, I certainly want to get into the newer stuff and,
Yeah.
and your journeys now. But I feel like I missed a little bit because I was really curious to
He's
me.
waited a long
I
time.
know.
I've waited a while.
And tell the people why you were not at that initial interview.
I was on my anniversary vacation with my beautiful wife, Peggy, in New York City.
No finer reason. No finer reason.
And we had a fantastic time. Monique called me, I think a day or two before leaving, and it was like the moment I'm going to interview Nitzer. Fantastic! When are we doing it? It's like the date is this. I can't do it.
I know.
So that was it. But your talk there, and I appreciate how you guys talked about your inspirations there. But also curious that when I found out that you lived in Los Angeles, because I was like, what? I thought you certainly still lived in Europe. So what was that transition? How did that come about? I mean, it was the political environment, I think, or social environment at the time. But kind of, do you want to walk us through how that happened when you leaving the UK to come to America?
Yeah, I mean, we were starting to get a foothold, as a full-time band, and things were on the up and up. And so much of it was centered around the US, a lot of the record company contacts and so on. And it was sort of, for a lot of European bands, it was like the key to really making it or not was breaking America.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big thing where a lot of bands, that would really kind of open up a lot of bands' scope and reach,
Okay.
if they could, because it's such a massive territory.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then, other things were with the entertainment industry. It opened up a lot of doors for bands. So we were aware of that. And, even from a kid, like I started off being influenced by like Marvel Comics, and then I got into skateboarding. So a lot of my influences were from the United States. So when the first time toured here for the first time, in a weird way, it felt like coming home, because I'd absorbed so much of the culture and sort of imagined so much of the culture. And in a certain way, there was a desire to get away from some of the small town provincial mentality of certain aspects of English life at the time. It was quite a conservative place.
So
And
you guys didn't feel like you fit in very well in that area.
I think, it was a brilliant. It was great being in England in the early '80s and the music scene and everything else. But towards the '90s, I think I felt like a period of time was coming to a close, and it was time to seek pastures new. And not exactly like the walls were closing in, but I could see like there were broader horizons, and everything seemed to point to the United States. And all the touring experiences that we'd had, I really enjoyed them, and I kept thinking like, I think somehow my future lies, at least in coming here and seeing what it's all about. And that was, close to 30 years ago, and here I still am.
Yeah. So that was it. More breaking in for your career and getting to absorb this environment.
I think we just stole you. I
Yeah.
think we just like,
I enticed you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and it was
So you moved to Detroit then, I guess.
no.
I moved to
Right? That's
talking of
what you
enticements.
think.
Yeah. No, actually, Doug and I, spread the love. So Doug actually moved to Detroit, and I moved to Chicago at the same time. So, obviously Chicago.
So you like, Doug, you take over Detroit and I'll take
Yeah, basically.
No, but seriously, how was that experience living in Chicago?
It was good. I mean, obviously, I'd been through there a lot on tour, and it was a big industrial music town. You had Wax Trax, the Metro and the Smart Bar, and a lot of bands were either US industrial bands were either from Chicago or had settled there because of Wax Tracks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was quite a logical place to go, and there were lots of studios there. So it just, I was familiar with it. We'd always done good shows there. I'd always been welcome there and sort of knew quite a few people. And I think coming from England, I think it would have been a big culture shock coming straight to LA, because a lot of my environment in England was working class, very kind of down to earth, no frills, a pint with the lads down the pub, even though we were into music. And Chicago had that,
Yes.
a lot of that vibe about it. So for me, it was an easing into US life, and or at least the areas I was living in Chicago, there were a lot of people from creative people, but from working class backgrounds, and a lot of the neighborhoods where we would drink or hang out were working class neighborhoods. So it kind of felt a little less alien to me. But I'd been through LA a lot of our music contacts and our labels were in LA, and initially I didn't really care for the place because when you're on tour, you got a very kind of surface level and kind of shallow experience. It was, and a lot of the time we were touring with Depeche. So we would go out with them. It was VIP everything, Sunset Strip, not necessarily really what I discovered after moving to LA, what makes this town special and what makes it tick. There is that superficial, Beverly Hills if you're interested in that kind of thing. But soon after moving here, I discovered that there's so much more to it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more of a down-to-earth, street-level, grassroots thing that keeps this city going and that provides its magic. And that's kind of what I fell in love with when I moved to LA.
Great.
All right, so again, let's go back again. So what precipitated you moving to LA? So what was the main
From
thing?
Chicago.
I'd been in Chicago for a couple of years, and it did kind of feel like a really good town for industrial music, and in a limited sense.
Okay.
And I also kind of felt like maybe
It wasn't the Chicago winter that maybe drove you?
that definitely contributed.
Really?
That did have an
Chicago, LA.
effect.
I mean, it's like...
Yeah, and also, like when I first moved there, the band was in full swing, and then over the course of living there, we'd done, I think it was our fifth album. It took way too long, was very conceptual, went over budget. It was a big departure that wasn't as well received. So I went from sort of being not exactly at the peak of where we developed to that point, but definitely on a downswing. And then really, like, when I lived in Chicago, that was the first time where suddenly after 12 years I was like flat broke, looking for work, and it felt like the band was sort of had reached a resting point, if you like, and I was looking to do new things, and it seemed to me that the best opportunity to do those things was not in Chicago.
Gotcha.
And a lot of the people that I'd had worked with, Geffen and contacts in the music industry, had been in New York. A lot of them coincidentally had moved over to the West Coast at that point. And most of the musicians, because I was looking to do new projects, most of the musicians that I knew and wanted to work with all lived in LA.
Gotcha.
So it was a little bit of a heavy heart that I went to LA, because I felt like I was sort of going into the jaws of the wolf a little bit, like a place I didn't really feel like I fitted and didn't know if I really liked that much. But I was like, well, that's where the best opportunities are. So I think I'm just going to have to go there and grin and bear it.
Yeah, I definitely know the feeling of that.
Yeah.
Going out to this place and taking on this challenge.
But you did a
It's
similar
scary.
thing too. Like you had to make that huge decision, you and your wife, moving from San Diego to LA.
Yeah, I feel like this was the place if I was going to expand.
But you actually liked LA. You have good experiences. I'm still on the other side of LA. I don't see what you guys see.
Right.
Except besides you two, and other people that I love that are here in LA.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what was that decision for you to move?
I think a lot like Bon, that if I was going to really move forward with what I wanted, I mean, I was doing some things in San Diego, I'm successful, but to really.
I mean, everybody knows your name in San Diego, so was that difficult for you to like leave?
No, because I'm not that far away.
And I can say this because people come up to me and they go, "Oh my gosh, are you Merrick's little sister?" And I'm like, "Oh, yes. Why? Yes, I am." And then I'll call them right away. And one more person asks me, "Am I your little sister?" They don't know my name, and it's okay. Maybe you should.
They hear MacArthur, and it's usually only MacArthur.
Yeah, and skin color, so, you just kind of think.
Yeah. I love that your experience in LA sounds like transformative for you.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found online that I didn't know about was this series of songs that you recorded called the Lemon Tree series. Tell me about the Lemon Tree and how that came about.
Well, that came about during the pandemic. I'd actually been planning to do a solo project again, and was planning to sing on it, to be the lead singer. And so I started to develop some stuff, but decided I needed a vehicle to sort of loosen my voice up. So that started off with me just getting into singing a little bit more and posting just a cappella social clips online from my garden in Eagle Rock, just wandering around the garden. And I was quite surprised. People responded like, "That sounded really nice. Could you?" I think the first one that I sang walking around my garden was Bare Necessities from Jungle Book. And people liked it, and they're like, "Oh, could you do the whole song?" Or some people would be like, "Could you do some electronic songs?" And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and I found myself like, we're lucky where we live, where it's fairly isolated, and we had this beautiful garden. When we first moved in, the garden in the evening, it's got several trees, one of which is this lovely lemon tree. And they were all underlit from these lawn lights. And I said to JB, I'm like, "That looks really beautiful. Like, I need to do something with that. Like, that's a really nice setting." And then it just all sort of fell into place, where when the pandemic started, I'd had these requests to elaborate on these little a cappella things I'd been doing. And I had to delay my plans for what was to become Mikro Funk, my other solo thing. So I thought, well, in the meantime, I'll pick several songs and rework them heavily electronically. And I'll plan to do a series of concerts that I'll film from the garden, because I knew people were locked in their houses. No one was going to shows. And I was seeing a lot of people like, they were having problems being enclosed and not being able to do the things they were used to doing. And I thought, I'm in a really fortunate situation here. And I can share something. I could actually do something. So.
And that was great too. I noticed listening to them. They were covers, a lot of them, I think.
All of them, yeah.
All of them covers.
They were, all of those very soothing, I felt very moved by all of them. It wasn't the high energy gunpowder that Nitzer Ebb had, but it was like, this is something that in a time like that you can listen to, and it was so much more, you could appreciate it so much.
Yeah, that's kind of how I envisaged it. Once I was like, okay, people are asking me for more things and electronic things, and I was like, well, it's the middle of the pandemic, so I want to do things that are not stressful, that are optimistic or nostalgic. Like, there were better times, there will be better times.
I see that.
This will pass. And also, just if I was going to do something myself, I really wanted it to be like the exact opposite from Nitzer Ebb.
Really?
Because I've always, all of us, in the band, like some people are surprised sometimes that, our main influences are James Brown and things like this.
I'm surprised by that.
So
you're a dancer.
Yes, exactly. So there was all these other things. I was like, well, people never get a chance to see it, and I generally am too busy with the Ebb and everything else. It's like I never get a chance to show it. So there I was, like in the midst of what was an adversarial situation. I'm like, well, I've got the space, I've got the equipment, and I've got the time to actually show a different side and maybe, give something back, because obviously no band is anything without an audience and its fans, and they do give a lot. And I felt like it was an opportunity to give something back, and knowing that I was very fortunate, to be in that situation. Only a few months before, we'd been in a second floor apartment,
Oh.
before we moved to our new place. And I was like, wow, it'd be a really different story.
Oh,
We're so
You've been
fortunate
there.
to
That timing.
have this new environment at this time. And I was like, well, I'd like to be able to share that positively with other people, and hopefully bring some kind of relief, and a little bit of stress relief to people's lives. And that's pretty much how it was received.
Yeah.
I was expecting a little bit more kickback from sort of the more hardcore industrial fans, because I was singing Buddy Holly songs, soft voice with lipstick and eyeliner on. I was like,
Great.
JB, did you do that? Did you put the lipstick on? Yeah.
And again, these are like, I remember from the early days, like David Bowie, T-Rex, and all that. Like any musician I was interested in, generally
Dead or Alive.
dressed outrageously and wore makeup.
Yeah.
Like for me, that's part of being a musician.
The Cure, everybody wears
So-
I do have a question about your song choices. So when I listen to songs from a living tree that you chose, I want to know, how did you choose the songs? Because you chose In Sympathy off the Sounds of the Universe, Depeche Mode, and that's one of my favorite of their albums. So and that's kind of one of my secret songs that doesn't get a lot of play. And you sang it so beautifully. So why did you choose that particular song out of all their albums that they had, in that particular one?
Well, to backtrack a little bit, all the songs that I picked on Songs for the Lemon Tree were songs that, through various stages in my life, had a massive impact when I first heard them and never left me. So the first episode was Buddy Holly, True Love Ways. I remember the first time ever hearing that. Never forgot it. Still in my CD collection. Still play it regularly. Rock On, David Essex. Always loved that track. Compulsion, a Mine Gore cover version. So I decided early on, like, these all had to be songs that had a pivotal impact on me. And still are very important songs to me, whilst maintaining that criteria of being somewhat hopeful or soothing or optimistic. And then the In Sympathy came a little bit after the first few episodes. And Atuza, who I just did the radio interview with, she ran a Depeche Mode fan group. And the Depeche fans are like just a whole other special community.
They are.
They just,
do I need to explain ourselves? I think me and Atuza, we've crossed paths a lot, and I think maybe we've met once. But you were saying what were you saying about Depeche Mode?
They're on other levels. What you're saying? You're just
especially in LA.
their fan communities on and on.
Especially in LA, maybe Paris, maybe Germany. But yes.
Yeah, like there was someone that sent a message into the radio show yesterday. Actually, I did a pre-appearance, and we were talking about overcoming our fears. And like Atuza was asking people to relate an occasion where that had happened. And one of the guys wrote in and said, I decided to go and follow Depeche Mode for several shows. Like a couple of weeks.
We know a lot of those.
On my own, and he said, and it turned out I wasn't on my own, because every show I went to, and people befriended me, and and I just made all these friends. And so again, during the pandemic, Atuza invited me onto one of her shows just as a guest. With like streamed show. I joined via Zoom, and I sang a couple of songs, and then we were going to do a follow-up show. And I said to her, is there a song you would like me to do, or any request or suggestion? And she said, there's a Depeche Mode song that I think never quite,
Atuza.
they never quite did justice to it. And she said, I think your voice would sound really good on it. And she was like, and coincidentally it's my birthday. So I was like, all right, I'll see what I can do. So initially I just did that song as a sort of a birthday present for Atuza, but also said, I'll perform it when we do the show, because her show was, the show that she invited me to do was a couple of days after her birthday. So I'm like, here's an early birthday present, and I'll perform it on the thing later on. And then fast forward to when we got the news about Fletch. I was in England and I was booked to do an in-store appearance at an HMV record store of songs from the Lemon Tree. I was playing in my hometown. So that was already booked on for a Saturday, and I think it was the Friday evening that we got news that, you know, the news about Fletch. And I thought, well, I was going to perform that song anyway, and it's a Depeche song, so it just seemed fitting for me to dedicate it to him, you know, because of what had happened.
Well, you want to get yourself a really nice treat. Go to Bond's website, bondharrisarts.com, and click on the Lemon Tree tab, and you'll see the series of episodes 1 through 3, I believe. Yeah. And speaking of your work and your sort of your solo work, you did a project. I'm not sure if it was a band or it was a project called Maven.
Yes.
We're going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Where you had, I think, some vocals from Marilyn Manson at some point. What was the start of that, and where did that go? And
that was during one of Nitzer Ebb's several hiatuses where, you know, I mean, it's tough being in a band. You know, we often talk about it, like, for better or worse, Doug and I's working relationship has outlasted numerous marriages.
Yeah.
You know, just it's 40 years old now. You know, there's very few, you know, relationships of any kind that you keep going for that long.
Did you hear this story about how Sting, they used to have fist fights, like the police or whatever?
Yeah.
They used to have fist fights.
I never heard that they had fist fights.
Yeah.
I heard that they
Like,
were
what are they got to fight about? They're the police. What's all right?
Yeah. But
But
you
you
know,
think about the Black Crows, same thing, brothers. They're brothers, and they didn't talk to each other for years
Sure.
as well. I don't know how many
Sure.
Black
yeah, I think AC/DC, you know, often came to blows in the
What's the
studio.
secret? What's the secret to keeping a long-standing band together? Because a lot of bands don't survive.
Regular 7-year hiatuses.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that seems to have worked for us.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, if you were being serious about it, you probably should take a break from each other. You should do solo projects, and that can be difficult, again, in the early days where there might be an insecurity, like if one person in the band is having success with a solo project, maybe the other people aren't comfortable with it. So it's a minefield, but I think in general that's, in later years, it's like have something outside of the band, have something outside of each other, and try and be able to walk away. And even if you're, this probably holds for any close relationship you have in your life, there are going to be times where you don't see eye to eye, you don't agree, or something has irked you about the other person, probably more so the more you know them. So it's important to be able to walk away and be like, yeah, you know what, they're driving me nuts, but underneath it all, I do love them and respect them, and I have to remember that and give myself enough space to get back to just being okay with that. Blow off the steam, get rid of the frustration, and then recognise that, like, there is something substantial and worth making the effort.
And beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, and when Doug and I are working well together, there is an undeniable chemistry.
Yeah.
You know, and as fulfilling as solo projects are, you know, there is a certain magic about that when that happens. So,
I mean, I literally saw it. I was so, afterwards, I thought maybe I kind of was disturbing you guys. I was behind stage watching them perform when they were here in San Diego.
Yeah.
And the energy, like once you got on stage first and you did your thing, and it brought me way back to Detroit.
Yeah.
All the music, you know, the sounds that I was listening to. That's why I wish you were there, because I was back at the shelter. I was back at St. Andrews, like back there. And then when Doug got on stage, it was and I'm looking at people that are in the audience, and I noticed that this is why I didn't go out into the audience, is because there was a roll of guys, and there was no way I was going to get in front of those guys or even by those guys, because they came to partake of So I just stayed my little scrawny self behind stage, you know, just listening. But that energy, I had like the best time ever just being a part of that with you guys. So I get it. I get it, the importance of kind of staying together as a group and bringing that beautiful thing, even if it's just for me.
So that's good. I'm glad that you guys are still touring, and
But go back
can't
to
wait
your Marilyn Manson. He was talking about.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask about that. You said it's a side project during your hiatus from.
Yeah. Basically, that was the first time, when I was in Chicago, where.
Oh, this is back in Chicago.
Yeah. We'd had a break. Well, that's where it started. We'd had a break, and I was like, okay, I definitely want to continue doing music. Sure. So, and I had some ideas, so I started that project, and that was kind of one of the catalysts that made me come to LA. I'd had some record company interest from the demos. Two of the musicians I wanted to work with were in LA, so I'm like, okay, to get Maven going and get it off the ground, or at least have a shot at it. It looks like I'm going to have to go to LA. So that's what I did, and it took a long time because I was freelance producing with people like Manson, Billy Corgan. So I was having to kind of juggle, if you like, a day job of studio work and collaborating, and then trying to get back to Maven and get that finished, which I eventually did get it finished in about 2005. And it was released on a small digital only label. But very soon after it was released, Billy Corgan asked me to go back to Chicago to work on his solo album, The Future Embrace. And I'd, at that point, spent all my money and all my time on getting Maven finished. So ideally, I would have been able to follow up with touring and promotion and everything else, but I had just run out of money and time, and I was offered a job, so I was like, I've got to go and do the job. So Maven got left a little bit, sort of pushed to one side, just because life happens, But it was a good experience. That was the first project where I was writing all the songs and lyrics and singing. And there were certain frustrations at the time, and even now when I listen to the record, I'm like, it takes me back to how I felt at the time, where it's the beginning of something, but I still hadn't quite found my way. And in fact, when I was considering doing the Lemon Tree, that was a little bit of a hurdle I had to get over, because I felt like my attempts at singing on Maven weren't entirely satisfactory, even to me. When I listened to it, I'm like, I can see what I was getting at, but I wasn't quite getting there.
Interesting.
And there was a little bit of trepidation about grasping that nettle again, in case it didn't fulfill, but it changed. My voice had changed, and I think I learned on that project, I could hear the places where I was trying to be things that I'm not.
Gotcha.
And I was trying to live up to a certain ideal, rather than just thinking, well, start singing first, see what happens, and see what you do naturally, and then have that drive the direction of the project, rather than having this set idea of what you want it to sound like and try and put yourself in that box. So
if I could just say, I remember Snoop Dogg talking about that, saying that you're a little bit unsure now about who you are, your voice or something like that, and then you listen to it. I think his words were he ended up sounding like one of the newer rap artists, and he was like, what the heck, I don't sound like this, why the heck am I trying to rap like them? I'm just gonna be who I am. So we're glad that you're continuing on this journey, that you're not giving up. And see, that's the thing, we're our worst critic, right? So when we hear ourselves, we're like, oh, we're not quite there yet, but we're still coming out. The fans are still coming out. We still want to see the next thing that you're doing. Does that give you wings, or does that give you wind under your wings to know that the fans are still looking for you to continue to create? Yeah,
you do have that definite sense that you've made a difference before, and the reason you made that difference is because you used your intuition to make the music that you made, and it wasn't, like a lot of the time in our early days in the Ebb, we were advised against doing certain things, and we were kind of like, well, this is what we want to do, so off you go with your opinion. So you go back to that instinct where it's like, look, if I feel like this is the right thing to do, and then in the act of doing it, I'm feeling like it feels right. Like when I did the Lemon Tree, as soon as I started singing them, any of those previous trepidations about how things had gone before went away, because I'm like, it sounds right to me, it feels right. I still knew what my limitations were and everything else, but you're at a point where you've made peace with it. It's like, I know what instrument I've got, I know what it's good at, I
Yeah.
know what it's not good at, so I know how to make the best of what I do have. And it was an interesting journey as well, just like throughout the whole thing, I could feel that I was learning more and getting stronger the whole time, and I'm like, well, that makes it a worthwhile pursuit in itself. And I think also, as you know, any kind of creative person, all you can do is bring your best self to the work. And then once it's out there in the public, you get used to the fact that you've got zero control over that at that point. People are going to react how they're going to react, and no amount of staying awake at night or thinking you could have done it better is going to change it. The thing that you need to do is go to bed once you've finished your work and say, I did my best. I represented myself how I wanted to represent myself, and if I have to get shot down in flames on the strength of that, I'm willing to get shot down in
Well,
flames.
man, that's what you do. You do that a lot, right?
Yeah,
You're
sure.
going out on auditions and things like that, and you're always like, you know, I gave it my best, and then there we go.
That's it.
Right? Or when you are in shows, right? But I always think that you're wonderful in shows, even though I don't say it very often.
There's one audition that I did where the roll call for it to be done with a New York accent. So it was an in-person audition years and years ago. And I'm sitting there, and the casting director assistant sitting in the room with me, and I'm doing this audition, going, I'm in my New York accent, and I'm done. And they go, okay, that's great. Now, can you do it in a New York accent? So
You're like,
so you do, yeah. So how are you doing this? I mean, you've got, it sounds like the Lemon Tree series is going to be a show among itself, and then you've got something real exciting called Mikro Funk.
Indeed.
Which I'm hearing about, which I just got a notice that a new track is coming out. I don't know how I got that notice.
Yes.
Imagine. So tell us about Mikro Funk and how you what
I love it already
do?
just with the names.
Yeah. Well, actually, Mikro Funk was the project that I was preparing for when I started doing the a cappella Lemon Tree things. I fully intended to sing on Mikro Funk, and I'd been developing a couple of the songs.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the pandemic happened, so I couldn't, I had to delay the Mikro Funk development. And Lemon Tree kind of took on a life of its own. I didn't expect it to be received as well as it was. And I couldn't really do that much else because I needed other musicians in the studio. So I just focused on Lemon Tree. And then once the pandemic finished, I got a chance to get back to Mikro Funk because I knew I wanted the background of it to be very electronic, but I wanted to have like a live brass section, live backing vocals, so on and so forth. And I write music every day. I remember seeing an interview or every day that I can. I remember reading an interview with Philip Glass, the minimalist composer. Years ago, I was probably about 21 when I read it, and they said, how do you write music? What's your creative process? And he said, I get up at 6 o'clock every morning, I get to my desk or my piano at 6:30, and I work until 10:30 every day, regardless of whether I'm inspired, if I've got an idea. It's my job, that's my office, I get up, I go to work, and I do my hours. And I remember thinking, how? At that time it was like I'd have days where I was super inspired and write 4 songs, and then 3 months where I'd just go down the pub and think I was the greatest, and figure like I'll just keep drinking lager until the next inspiration comes, But it's always in the back of your mind, like if you're in any kind of creative pursuit. There's that constant fear of writer's block or the ideas or the motivation drying up. And I remember that really struck a chord of both admiration and terror. Because I was like, brilliant. He gets up. I was like, well, how does he do it? How does he structure himself? So I started spending a lot of thought on that and developed various ways throughout the years. And so the net result is now every day I get up and just write some music. And I noticed, not surprisingly given my background and influences, that when left to my own devices, it was usually quite funky. You know, so
that's what just comes out.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So and yeah, again, it's not surprising from early years of that. You know, I've listened to so much of that kind of music and absorbed so much of that. It's probably not. And you know, incidentally, I do try and get up fairly early.
Yeah.
And start writing when I'm not totally awake, because your inner critic and your sensor isn't as active, and when my inner sensor isn't active, I'm funky AF. Yeah, that's just my natural, you know. So yeah, I started to get these sketches that were sort of falling into this little category. So I've got different folders when I write in the morning. So like, this one might be in that style, you know, blah, blah, blah. But I started to have a collection of these songs that definitely had a funky edge to them.
So you're going to be going on tour in Europe. Are you going to be writing? Are you going to continue?
Yeah,
with
I always
project?
take a, you know,
Okay.
like my suitcase on any given trip is about 10% clothes and personal items. The rest is musical equipment
Yeah.
and stuff to work with.
Yeah.
You know, it can be quite a challenge, but yeah, I've got good at just being transient and setting up in a corner somewhere and getting to work. And, you know, I kind of put a lot of effort into structuring my days where there is some kind of space somewhere
Somewhere.
to just be creative. I mean, even these days, like at an airport with an iPad, you can put phones on and just do something. And
Are you consistent? Are you
Would you say
consistent
you're
every day?
consistent?
Like, you know, was it Philip Glass every day? Or are you...
I wouldn't say it's every day and it's not the same time every day,
Is there a set-
but it
well,
is
let me-
consistent. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a schedule like every week when you know you're going to be sound checking on tours, or you're going to be doing something else, TV shows or whatever for other people? Do you work that in? Do you work your own personal creative time? And I'm trying to give a structure for struggling musicians or artists, creatives who somehow whatever life happens and you kind of slacked off, and just encouraging them to get back into it, including myself. Encouraging
Yeah.
them to get back into it. And so,
Yeah.
so do you work that in? Like you see what your schedule is, and you go, okay, I have Tuesday. Well, I have a couple of minutes, and then I have Thursday, and then I may have Saturday. Do you think like that, or is it just completely organic?
Yeah, you do think a little bit like that. That tends to be more like between shows. So like, you know, I'll stay with family members when I'm in England between shows. So I know those days, you know, I'll set up my day. So I'm like, there needs to be 4 hours in there where I can go, you know, have the solitude and do what I want to do.
Okay.
And anytime you're traveling, you know, all bets are off. You don't know. So all I really do then is make sure that I have something that's normally an iPad or something that's really quick to just turn it on, put some headphones on. And on those days, you're just looking for opportunities. I mean, anything involved with traveling or working in the entertainment business, there's a lot of hurry up and wait.
Sure.
So you know those periods are going to come up. So you just kind of keep an eye out from them, and you know, like, okay, I'm sitting here waiting to get on the flight and it's delayed by an hour. Just get the thing out and start working.
I do the same when I'm working on a setup, packing up stuff to do work, so I get a lot of downtime.
Yeah, yeah,
Sure.
yeah, and it, you know, and it stops you getting, you know, I see people just playing video games or whatever, getting really bored, and I'm like, well, you know, you could use that time creatively.
Yeah.
Or even if I'm not writing music, I mean, I do journal religiously every
Oh, really?
morning.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, when I first arrived in LA, I was flat broke, and you know, I don't drive a car, never have.
Really?
So, right, never driven a car in my life. So I'm stuck in LA, penniless, you know, and for some reason, someone bought a copy of The Artist's Way. It's a book by Julia Cameron, quite well known as a kind of a creative self-help book, and I really looked down on those things at the time. I thought they were like hippie nonsense. You know? So someone brought this book round, and I threw it in the corner. You know, I was like, whatever. You know, I don't need that rubbish. And then I said, you know what? I'll do it just to show you what a load of rubbish it is. And
Got into
30 years later,
Yeah.
I'm still doing it every day.
That's great.
Yeah.
So Mikro Funk now, it's tell me where we are with that project. Do you have a timeline of when we're going to see a full album? What are we?
How I planned that out was that I would do a series of EPs, because I find that you know, I did a similar thing with Lemon Tree. Like each episode was 4 songs. It's like a manageable little mini project to do, has some continuity, captures a moment that you're in. And I think it also makes attention with, you know, the way you market and sell music these days. The attention span is ridiculously short.
Yeah.
So personally, I'm not as keen on entrenching yourself for a year and doing an album. I much prefer doing collections of 4 tracks, putting those out, then do another collection of 4, and then maybe on the 3rd collection of 4 you gather them all together with some extra songs, a limited edition, lots of remixes, but kind of more of a little and often approach.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And then that's how I decided to do it with the actual. So even though this first Mikro Funk releases a 4-track EP, I decided to do it single by single.
Okay.
And have them spaced roughly a month apart.
Okay.
And then when the 4th single is released,
A whole month?
A month apart.
a month between the tracks.
Why a month?
You gotta
Just-
get it. You gotta absorb one.
Why a month?
Well,
Do you know what age we're living in? We got to eat it all now.
All right.
At least I would say like a week, but you're like doing a whole month.
well, that's mainly down to my human bandwidth because, you know, I'm also working on the Ebb. Lemon Tree has taken on, so I'm doing Lemon Tree live show. So I had to kind of build in a little bit of latitude for myself, where it's like, I don't want to put the pressure on myself of like having this all prepared.
Leave that pressure to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it was just a way of managing it for myself, really. You know, so that's the path I chose to take. And again, you know, this is the first fully DIY release I've ever done.
Really?
You know, I've always been signed to labels and stuff like that. So it's a bit of an experiment for me as well. Like
How are you liking that? Doing it yourself?
I've learned a lot. I've learned what I wouldn't do next time. You know, there's a lot to be said for just being able to make your own decisions and do it on your own schedule. There's also frustrating things, you know, like the amount of time that's taken up with social media and things, you know, self-promotion. I think that's where the old system was superior because musicians should focus on being musicians.
Right.
They shouldn't try and be part-time publicists and graphic designers.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I often think like a couple of days ago I spent the entire day formatting artwork for different social media platforms. And I'm like, what would have been the outcome if I'd have done that back on the day that I wrote Joining the Chant?
Yeah.
What if I did this instead of writing Joining the Chant? You know, and I find that hard to reconcile. And all the time I'm working on these things, I'm like, the next greatest thing that I might have written might have happened today if I wasn't doing this. And I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not even that good at it. You know, I managed to squeak by at appearing to be organised on social media, but I don't think it's the best situation for creative artists to be in. And I think I do see a lot of artists, especially musical artists, concentrating more on the presentation than on the actual music.
Yes, I agree.
You know, and in a lot of creative fields, I think people just are so encouraged to focus on image and constant visibility rather than honing their craft. And I'm like, people aren't going to remember that you did a Instagram thing where the 3 little tiles matched up and made it. They're not even going to remember that next week.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
as a
right.
musician, what they're going to remember you for in 10 years is a great song. So,
You guys hear that? That's
You know.
pretty good.
and for me personally, that's what I want to be remembered for. I'm in this for the music, not to make pretty pictures or, you know, be a social media guru. I'm not really that interested. But, you know, you understand that this is the world we live in and you have to adapt a little bit. But you just have to be careful that you don't get sidetracked from being an artist into being a content bot. You know, and that's a constant thing that I have to keep an eye on. You know, like being responsible and, you know, not being a prima donna and saying I'm not going to do that stuff, because if you're starting a project yourself from the grassroots, you have to, whether you like it or not. But keeping a balance in there. And for me, if it really does come down to a choice between creativity and the promo stuff, well, the creativity's going to win every time.
All right, so we were talking about your shows that are out in the UK, right? That you're going to be going on, and then are you going to be doing any more songs from the Lemon Tree here in the States? Because you were just in Mexico. In Mexico,
Yes.
you had a couple of shows and they were
did.
wild, right?
That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so always get a good reception. Was it in Mexico City or where was it at?
Played in Mexico City and just outside Mexico City. Yeah.
Yeah, and so where you go after for 2024? What's your schedule going to look like for 2024? We were kind of hoping that you would play the Depeche Mode convention in 2024. So Nitzer Ebb, we were kind of hoping. So what can we do to make that happen?
Well, we'll see. When is it?
It is normally in November. We have ours in November 12th of this year, and it's normally November of every year that we do the convention.
Right.
And so I'm just
No, I'd never say never.
Okay.
Never
Okay. We
say
just have to give you the right number.
Yeah, there you go. So 2024 is still kind of forming. We've got various shows in Europe, in the works. Some stuff planned for the US, not totally finalised yet,
Okay.
so it's not ready to be announced. But the first half of 2024 is looking pretty busy. I will.
Which part of the States that you think is going to be busiest? So you know where to look for you.
Probably, most of the time with plans like that, it's like major markets.
Okay,
So,
okay.
so the major cities, the A markets, is what we're looking at. But those are to be confirmed. I will go back down to Mexico because all the brass instruments and everything on Mikro Funk were recorded in Tapachula, in
really?
Mexico. Yes. And increasingly, I'm working with a lot of people down there. Just I love being down there, and
They treat you very well.
yeah,
Yes.
and I've just one of those things where I happen to have met a lot of people that I get along with, and we
Well,
work.
Merrick, weren't you saying that you wanted to do a whole Detroit festival and you wanted to get all of the industrial and alternative bands together?
Are you trying to just kind of create this in this moment?
You were talking about that.
Sounds
You were
like it.
saying that you were gonna put it together. You were gonna get all your friends from Michigan because they live in different places now, but mostly in Michigan and some Atlanta friends.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, I said
And you were
that.
gonna put on a whole
Oh, yeah, yeah.
festival
Yeah.
right there in the middle of
we had
Park
this whole
Plaza.
conversation about this. Yeah.
Park Plaza, Shane Park. Where are we gonna
remember this.
do it at?
remember all
Yeah. Okay. So we just have to. We need some investors.
Yeah, that's
Some
what you
investors
said.
to
That's
get
what we were
because
saying.
Bond ain't cheap.
No,
No.
no.
I just want to tell you, his wife said he ain't cheap.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
So all you
Good t-shirt.
investors,
Vaughn ain't cheap. Just get your t-shirt.
And I think in terms of that Detroit thing, not only did you hear it here first, I think you might have heard it here first as well.
Yeah.
so we just want to get contacted by all you investors that.
We're working on new stuff and new plans, so we're always figuring out how to move it forward. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you guys. What did you say, Merrick?
Again, thank you so much for joining us for this talk, and it's really great to meet you and get to know a
Likewise,
bit
Merrick.
about you. And it's good. You're a very cool dude.
thank you.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. It was
Yeah.
a pleasure.
All right, so Melanin Monarchy, that is it for this time. We will be having Bon Harris and his beautiful wife, hopefully, will join us next time. But we're going to continue this conversation because, as you can tell, he has a lot more work and a lot more to provide for you guys and to share with you guys through this journey of his. And so we just want to be there for him and with him every step of the way. Okay, you guys? So again, check us out on YouTube, check us out on Instagram, and also check out the songs from the Lemon Tree. Can we get that information one more time? What
It
was
is-
that?
You can find it on the Bon Harris Arts website, bonharrisarts.com. There's a tab for the Lemon Tree.
Yeah, and on YouTube, Bon Harris Arts
Yeah.
on YouTube. And at some point there will be an album. Again, it's a human bandwidth thing. I've got to go in and record all the vocals. So there's that, and then there's Mikro Funk as well. So if you,
All right,
if you-
Mikro Funk.
that's available on all streaming platforms. So if you search for Bon Harris Arts Mikro Funk, you'll find it on all the major streaming platforms. And we are aiming to do physical product, CD and vinyl, hopefully in March 2024 for Mikro Funk.
Yeah, and when that does come about, we're going to definitely go ahead and talk about that on Melanin Monarchy. And when we do, you guys pull out your wallets and let's get it going, okay? So we can keep the music going, and that's what we want to do here, okay? All right, thank you guys. See you next time.
Cheers.